Welcome back to ESBR Boxing's YouTube channel. Delighted as always to be joined by Elliot Grigg. We've been inspired by Tony Weeks' premature stoppage of Ismael Barroso against Rolando Romero last night for the WBA super lightweight title. One of the worst stoppages you'll ever see. Elliot, we've been discussing all day other stoppages that we're kind of going to touch on as well, but yeah, good to speak to you again, but keen to get your not immediate thoughts, kind of nearly 24 hours ago now, but yeah, what are your thoughts on what was a very controversial stoppage last night in Las Vegas?
Terrible, terrible, man. I mean, I like some of the stoppages you see in other fights that we might touch on. You occasionally might get one or two people kind of coming out and going, it was bad, but it may have been slightly too early, or maybe this was sort of happening. That was sort of happening. Kind of understand it, make some sort of rationale about it, but literally it's been unanimous, hasn't it, from everyone within the boxing community, with outside of the boxing community, just going, this was a disgrace. The fact that obviously Barroso was up on the cards as well, I think obviously heightens and adds to the kind of disgust of what happened. But it was just you can't rationalize, you can't make any excuse for it. And in a fight of that size as well, like a world title fight like that, it's bad. It's really bad, frankly, and it's bad for the sport in general. We've had bad events going on, like we said yesterday as well. Like we've had some of the misfit stuff. I don't get me wrong, like people can do what they want to do. I'm not against it, but it's just like seems like the sport in general, just constantly trying to do things like fighters don't fight each other, mismatches, whatever stuff like this. It really is a real stain on the sport, frankly, and it's just another hammer blow as far as I can see.
Yeah, not great. I think didn't really want to bring this up, but another thing I'm going to bring it up. You mentioned not a great time for our sport with the misfit stuff. I was at your call on Friday night, and obviously Jose bursting against Elisaro, fantastic fight by the way. But obviously as soon as the fight finished, kind of a massive fight broke out with multiple chairs being thrown and some people actually getting hurt. So I think that on the Friday night, KSI Misfits situation on Saturday night, and then in the early hours of Sunday morning having this. So not the best weekend for our sports. But we're not going to touch on all of that. Um, yeah, I think what one thing I really kind of want to discuss with you, Elliot, is where does this rank in terms of the worst stoppages of all time? Um, I'm it might be a bit of a brash statement, but I'm yet to see someone provide a worse stoppage in the past 24 hours or so. So if you've got one, please post it in the comments. But yeah, I've not seen the stoppages as bad. I think happened in the ninth round of a 12 round fight. For those that don't know, I think Barroso was a late replacement, came up against Romero. Barroso, 40 years old. Romero was the fairly strong favourite, I would say. Think was up on Barroso was up on the judges' scorecard on all three judges' scorecards, which again was a surprise. He was not expected to be in that position against the much kind of younger Romero. And then I'm not even going to call it trouble, but the first kind of um, it was just very strange. I'm almost not sure how to describe it. There was kind of a coming together towards the end of the ninth round, and it feels like Tony Weeks at an opportunity once has forced himself to jump in and end the fight. Elliot, what was your you might be able to describe better than me. What was your reading of that stoppage in terms of what happened? It's weird to describe because that fight shouldn't have been stopped. So it's weird to actually describe it as a stoppage.
My reaction at the time was just, I mean, the thing is, you don't want to say corruption, but you kind of have to say corruption. And I'm glad I can use the word corruption because I saw Teddy Atlas post something similar on Twitter about how he's no longer ringside for overusing the word corruption, how it would be used again. And I think he's right. I can't. Some of the feedback we've seen, and don't get me wrong, I'm not a PBC aficionado, but some of the tweets that we've had, especially, are people saying that essentially, that from their as a sort of promotional side, they tend to be quite sketchy, and that you see a lot of kind of like machinations going on with matchups, etc., etc. I don't know exactly, to be honest with you, what was going on, but it just looks so fishy. Like the guys there, the guys punching, even the knockdown before that wasn't legit knockdown really. So you're sitting there going, right, you've had an illegitimate knockdown, really, been scored as a knockdown. Okay, we've seen that happen before. Even on the same night, KSI launching an elbow, but we've seen that happen before. But then when that happens, you see a guy essentially fighting back, and you were saying as well, like he didn't take a clean shot. There's a big shot, obviously comes in from Romero, the right hand slips that, throwing back, and then I don't know. Well, the weird thing as well for me, I'd to add to as well, is the fact that Barroso at the time just seemed like he didn't seem like that bothered. He just kind of was like, I don't know, like it seemed weird. And then obviously afterwards, obviously people are sort of kicking off a bit, and he's going like, in the interview, the translator, etc., he was saying how dodgy it was, but it didn't seem like a man also that wasn't expecting it, and that might be a bit of a weird like conspiracy or Trumpian sort of thing to say, but it just seemed the whole thing seemed odd. His reaction seemed odd. The stoppage seemed odd. The round in general seemed odd. Yeah, there's nothing about it. I would like to see it, to be honest with you, no contested, or something essentially happen. I'm not necessarily saying that Barroso, be 41 probably by the time they fight next. So again, it might, Romero might well get the victory then, but it shouldn't be allowed to happen where he just goes and walks off and fights Ryan Garcia next. Shouldn't be allowed to happen. So you're on mute, mate.
Apologies, I was enjoying you so much I had to put myself on mute. The last 10-15 seconds of the fight, if you said to me who had the most success, the answer is actually Barroso. And as I was saying to you off the call, when that fight was stopped, I didn't know why it was stopped. I didn't know who it was in favor of. So it was all really bizarre. And I think some people have brought up the fact that Tony Weeks was in charge of the Marcus Brown fight in Badou Jack, when Badou Jack had the horrific cut on his forehead. He let that fight go the full distance. Tyson Fury versus Otto Wallin, as well. Tyson Fury had a horrific cut. He's an experienced referee. He's been involved in big fights. What was it about Barroso that he thought this guy can't take anymore? Barroso, by the way, when the fight was stopped, was clearly just completely fine, had his senses about it. So, don't know. I'm not one to call for corruption either. And it's not something I feel like anyone should do lightly, because if you consider what you're accusing someone of, and if you consider Tony Weeks, his job is to referee, and I would like to think he's not been kind of bribed in any way, shape, or form. But when a decision is that bad, you have to question it. As we try to do here at Ismael, gonna try and have a bit of fun now, which I know we're both in the mood for. We're both going to name an equally or worse or better, whichever way you want to look at it, stoppage as well. That kind of springs to mind when you think of really bad stoppages. Elliot, give us your example of another really bad stoppage you've seen during your time of watching the sport.
Okay. So yeah, that's caveat. This may not be the worst. Some historian may crawl out of the woodwork and talk about a sort of 6-rounder that took place in Cape Town in 1976. But I'm going to go with something that I remember actually watching at the time. And this is back in 2012, and this was a fight for Commonwealth light heavyweight title between Enzo Macronelli and Orville McKenzie. That was actually the reason I brought this one into this discussion, is because Saturday night reminded me of this fight, in the sense that McKenzie was known at that time for starting quite quickly, heavy-handed to a degree, but wasn't necessarily known for like going down the stretch in fights. Therefore, when you watch the fight and you know that, and you see sort of ends, this was second round where it was eventually stopped. The referee was Ian John Lewis, but when you see McAnally essentially just covering up, firing back, but sort of covering up, letting him sort of like get his sort of bigger shots out of the way, essentially in the hope of sort of tiring him down the stretch, it's of no surprise how the fight was sort of playing out at that point. And he's firing back the whole way. Gets to the point in the second round where he kind of gets not against the ropes, but he gets backed up to a corner to a degree. And there's one sort of right hand essentially goes through. But other than that, he's still firing back, still absolutely firing back. Lands, I think, a left hook to the body, essentially before the referee jumps in. And then what makes it so surprising, and I would urge you to see this, I think you can still see it on YouTube, is that when John Lewis does dive in, and obviously Matt Connelly's putting his hands up going, what else happening, not a mark on him, whatever, he's not touched the canvas or in any stretch or form, is the fact that the ref John Lewis almost seems as surprised as Matt Connelly. He's almost at that point gone, I've waived this, so I have to continue to waive this, but you actually are fine, is the kind of impression you get when you watch it. And actually, at the time, I was thinking, obviously, this is a disgrace, etc., etc. But then over the years, etc. as well, I also think of Matt Connelly. I mean, imagine going through a sort of a 12-week, an 8-week, a 10-week training camp to fight for literally what is like 6 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever, and have that happen to you for as I said, the Commonwealth light heavyweight title, which the Commonwealth title at that stage seemed to have more gravitas, I think, than it does now, frankly. But it seemed to be sort of a live. Or maybe I was just watching too much Steve Bunce on Satanta at that point. But it did seem more of a worthwhile title. So yeah, in quite a big fight. And obviously, I mean, for those guys who necessarily don't know, Nakanelli fought him again, after that as well, and stopped him in the 11th round. But it was just, it was a disgraceful decision. But it reminded me very much actually of what happened with Romero and Barroso, even on I suppose a slightly smaller scale, given that it wasn't a world title fight.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I think it's interesting for you. That's the one that stands out to you. Obviously, we've not put a time range on this. We're not boxing historians, as you mentioned, but that stoppage was quite a while ago. And yeah, the fact it kind of still rings to you out of any other stoppage you could have picked. Says something. I'm not going to comment on it too much. I don't need to comment on Ian John Lewis too much. I think he's had dodgy kind of stoppages in the past. I think he was involved in one, including Brian Rose in Blackpool quite a long time ago as well. That one's that speaks out to me. But yeah,
the golden era style. I mean, a lot of our viewers may be too young to remember this, but it was a golden era.
Yeah, no, we'll see. We'll see. Yeah, interesting. It's always interesting to see the average age of people who watch these videos. But yeah, some might be able to give some really good examples as well. Ian John Lewis is no longer a referee at that sort of level, and we'll leave it at there. I'm going to give my example now, more of a kind of perhaps more of a casual example around the same sort of time period that you've given it as well, though. 2013, Carl Froch versus George Groves won in Manchester. Howard Foster was the referee this time. Don't feel like I really need to go into much detail about what happened in this fight. I think it's been discussed before. I want to also point out and say I don't think this stoppage was as bad as last night. I just think that given how the fight had gone, given the position that George Groves was in, he was going in there as the underdog as well, and I don't think many people gave him a chance going into that first fight. And it just felt like the moment Groves was in any sort of trouble, Howard Foss and kind of Groves for some reason had this reputation as like being really chinny, whereas Carl Froch had this reputation of being kind of this absolute 12-round warrior, which is fair enough. And as soon as Groves was in a bit of trouble, Howard Foster thought, right, this is an opportunity for him to get stops. And I'm of the opinion that Groves was in trouble, and maybe in 15, 20 seconds time, the fight could have been legitimately stopped. But at the time, I've always put it down as a really bad stoppage. But yeah, interested to get your opinion on that one.
I think that's a good shout. To be honest with you, I agree with what you're saying. I think it wasn't as bad as Saturday night. So I feel like, but equally, it was contentious. I remember dragging some lads to a dive bar in Prague to watch that fight, and so there was good atmosphere there. But I was stunned actually to remember when Groves put him down, having said he was going to put him down with the right hand. It was unbelievable. And Groves did come out at the end of the fight, I believe, and said what you were saying there as well about essentially Froch's reputation, basically influencing the referee. And to be honest with you, I think he was spot on. I think you're spot on as well. Don't get me wrong, when you watch it back, yes, Froch does hit him a couple of times flush, but you've seen how the fight was playing out. You saw, and then this is that thing, isn't there? Like where you just intuitively know, like a guy deserves to at least maybe see the end of the round, or if he does go down, he goes down, whatever. But in a world title fight of that magnitude, you expect him to have the benefit of the doubt. So I think it was a bad stoppage. Equally, I suppose, which we're venerated by the fact that the rematch had to happen. Essentially, and there were boos, weren't there? I believe on the apron when Froch started saying it was a good stoppage. I mean, I'd like to think. Don't get me wrong. I think Froch's reputation as being like, now he's got a bit of a dodgy reputation as being, the 80,000 Carl Froch and the flat earth Carl Froch. But we have to separate that and go, Carl Froch was absolutely fantastic fighter for Great Britain over the last sort of like 20 odd years. And he had that reputation he has for fights against like the likes of Kessler, Abraham, Jermaine Taylor, all those things, but you could go 12 rounds hard. So in a way, I can kind of see why you believe that. And I do think in that fight, he would have stopped George Groves, frankly, the way it was going. He looked fresh. I do think he would have got to him, but it was way too soon. Yeah, and I think fighters deserve the benefit of the doubt, frankly, when it gets to that. So that is a legitimate fight that was stopped too soon.
Yeah, I'm just going to round things off here by saying, like, I think we appreciate referees have difficult jobs, and if a fighter was to get hurt in there because the fight went on too long, people are going to point to the referee. However, I just think in the three examples that we've given, you need to have somewhat of a conclusive ending, and you need to kind of jump in when someone's been beaten to an extent, when someone's very much throwing punches, very much a live fighter.
Mm.
Need to let it continue. But I've said it once, I'll say it again. That stoppage last night is the worst stoppage I've ever seen. World title fight or not, big fight or not, and not a great look for our sport. Elliot, thank you very much. Looking forward to more sorts of conspiracy type videos with you. And yeah, we'll definitely speak to you again soon.
No worries. We're in the right sport for it. And yeah, thank you guys for watching.